The 2020 Butler County Fair. We will now be starting our Meet Goats show. We are going to start with Class 1. Boar goats. Okay, for our boar goats. Entering in the ring will be Blake Jacobson, Mackenzie Bohach, Emma Wedeking, Weston Jensen, and Lily Wedeking. Please remember that throughout our fair, we would appreciate friends' social distancing.
Really nice set of goats just to go ahead and start off this lightweight class with. Young lady's got a really nice goat here to start this as a first place in this class. A really powerful goat in terms of top line on this goat. A goat that goes ahead and gets on the move exceptionally well in terms of really flexibility as well. Young lady goes ahead and gets this goat really stuck well and gets to go ahead and gets embraced and shown exceptionally well to start this class. I think the really biggest difference when we go ahead and get in our first and second place wethers in terms of the amount of muscle and mass that first place had. Our second place goat of the class is definitely a longer body, has a more extension through your front 1/3, but a goat for me that goes ahead and gives up some of that top shape that our first place goat in the class had. A goat that still has enough twist for me. A goat that we maybe just go ahead and change him just a tick in terms of the rear leg set for me. Our third place goat of the class is a goat that's definitely a long-bodied goat. A goat that goes ahead and maybe is not straight and nearly as clean in terms of where that condition today, maybe just go ahead and change it in terms of that chest floor. As we go ahead and round out this class with the next 3 goats, some goats what we just like to go ahead and change in terms of how they're put together structurally to make them more competitive in this class. But let's go ahead and put our hands together for this set of exhibitors today for the goats they brought out.
First place went to Emma Wedeking. Second place went to Weston Jensen. We are now doing class 2 of the boar cross. Exhibitors entering the ring for this show, or for this class, is Abby Wilson, Ella Lubers, Brennan Steer, Draven Capper, and Brennan Steer.
As we go ahead and get into this second weight class of market goats here, Young Man's Weather is going to be our class winner in this goat that kind of struck me when I walked into the ring, one that's really fluid in terms of the movement and skeletal structure, a goat in terms of where he's at, in terms of his conditioning, I think is really dialed in today, but a goat that you can really appreciate his athletic ability. I think he's really extended through that front 1/3. You may want to go ahead and get critical of him in terms of maybe how his shoulders are really tucked into that front end, but for me that doesn't bother me, and I think it's a goat that goes ahead and excels in this class. I think this doe here in second place really goes ahead and ties closely in behind this first place goat. But for me, when you go ahead and really evaluate this doe, she is obviously a smaller statured doe in terms of size today. She's a doe you can appreciate in terms of how open she is. She's a doe that maybe is fighting a little bit, but and maybe causing me to see this, but I don't think she moves and flexes nearly as well as what that first place Weather in this class does. But really a powerful doe that sits in this second place hole today. As we go into our third place, by far the largest skeletal structured goat in the class, a goat for me when you go ahead and really evaluate him for length of body in terms of muscle and mass today, I'd like to go ahead and clean him up in that chest floor and open him up a little bit more for where he's at, and maybe go ahead and structure or change him a little bit in terms of how his rear passion set is. We go into our fourth place Weather of the class, a goat that has some length of body to him, a goat that maybe like to go ahead and change in terms of how his overall muscle mass is today. And then we go ahead and round out this class with a really large skeletal Weather, a Weather that you'd like just to go ahead and change in terms of add some muscle shape and definition to him. But let's congratulate this set of exhibitors for their market goats they brought out.
Entering the ring is our class 3 for Boar Cross. We have Brennan Steer, Madison Klingenberg, Colton Harkin, and Cassidy Stout. Our winner of class 2 was Brennan Steer, and second place was Ella Lubers. All goat exhibitors, please keep your goats pinned in the arena until after the junior showmanship class.
We certainly go ahead and get into these heavier goats. They certainly are starting to carry some more condition than some of the younger ones are today. But I think there's a goat that goes ahead and kind of puts together a total package for me that goes ahead and wins this class. A goat in terms of length of body, a goat that we maybe could agree that or argue that he is starting to carry some more condition, but I think he's certainly the fresher one in the group today that kind of handled a goat you can appreciate for that length of body and that overall muscle and mass. A goat that you maybe just want to go ahead and have flex a little bit easier for me today, but a goat you can really appreciate and goes into that first hole. The challenge for me when we go ahead and get into the second place goat, he is a tick weaker on his rear pasterns, a goat that is maybe a tick not as I want to call him shorter body, but a goat that I'd like to go ahead and change in terms of that muscle shape and pattern that he has. When he gets on the move, he's maybe one of the more athletic goats in the top pair, but for me, he's a goat that bothers me in terms of how he's down in that rear pasture. Our third place goat of the class is by far the longered goat of the class, a goat that's really extended through the front 1/3, a goat that just maybe doesn't have the total package that the first two goats of the class does. As we round out the class, a longer body goat, a goat that's really, in terms of where he's at today, condition-wise, probably starting to carry more condition. You can appreciate the bone under this goat, but let's congratulate this set of exhibitors for the goats they brought out.
Winner of the Class 3 boar class was Colton Harkin. Second place was Brennan Steer. We will now be picking a grand champion and a reserve champion. Will those of you who placed first or second in your class please come out with your exhibit?
really nice set of goats in this champion drive. I think we need to go ahead and commend these exhibitors and exhibitors that brought goats out in the previous classes, and really to the families and the breeders of these goats, because they've done a nice job in putting a good set together today. Let's go ahead and put our hands together for them. I think when we really get down to evaluating, I think there's a pair of goats that kind of surface to the top for me. Some goats that have some skeletal shape and muscularity, but also athletic ability about them. But also some goats that really go ahead and move, like I said, that have some good bone and foot under them. I think that's important no matter if we're talking about a market animal or a breeding animal as we go ahead. As I mentioned earlier this morning in terms of the sheep, I think it's important because ultimately we're putting a product on the plate for consumers somewhere at the end of the day. I'll go ahead and congratulate your champion goat out here, and then I'll follow up with reserve. Let's congratulate all these kids for the projects they brought out.
Your grand champion is Brennan Steer, and your reserve is Ella Lubers. Our, our, our champion meat goat trophy is sponsored by Green Insurance Services, and our reserve champion market meat goat is sponsored by Allison Propane Gas. Emma Wedeking is the champion of our Butler County born and raised market goat. The champion Butler County raised meat goat trophy is sponsored by Butler County REC. We are now ready for our breeding junior doe class 1. Those exhibitors may enter the ring. Breeding junior doe class 1. Mackenzie Boach will be in the ring. Draven Capper, Emma Wedeking, Emma Braun, and Lily Wedeking.
Really nice pair of does to go ahead and start this class off. I think it's a close placing between these two in terms of how they are, in terms of similar package. I chose to go with the young lady's doe to go ahead and start this class off. I think in terms of how she handles herself, in terms of athletic ability, and in terms of how she's open through middle 1/3, but also in terms of how good she is on her feet and legs. I really appreciate in terms of how this doe is put together, but I think in terms of a female being able to lay down and have some offspring, I think she's a good breeding piece to go ahead and start this class off with. You may go ahead in our second place, and some of the differences I see in this doe is our second place doe is very similar. I think she may have a little bit more top shape, but a doe that also goes ahead and starts having maybe a little bit more shoulder and also condition today in terms of our first place doe, but a doe that goes ahead and fits nicely into that second place hole. The third place doe of the class, a really long-bodied, extended doe, a doe that you can appreciate for the feet under her, a doe that you maybe just want to go ahead and change a little bit in terms of the muscle shape that she has, that you like to have maybe a little bit more muscle expression in her, and to go ahead and be more competitive with the two does ahead of her in the class. As you go ahead and round out the class, the last three does of the class are just differences in their kinds and shapes in terms of how they're really put together in terms of where they're at today. Some does that maybe just have some good breeding pieces to them as well, but certainly some ones that have some potential down the road in terms of their offspring. Let's congratulate all these exhibitors for the goats they brought out.
We are now ready for breeding junior doe class 2. Our exhibitors are Abby Wilson, Lily Wedeking, Emma Wedeking, Weston Jensen, Mackenzie Boach, and Sydney Lovren. The results of our class 1, our winner was Emma Wedeking, and second place was Lily Wedeking.
We have a really powerful doe that goes ahead and starts this class off. One you can really appreciate for her flexibility and mobility, but also a female in terms of thickness through that top line. A female that's really open and extended through that front 1/3. Young lady does a really nice job in going ahead and getting that female showed for us. One that goes ahead and, like I said, I think handily wins this class. We go ahead and get into the second place goat of the class, a goat for me that goes ahead and gets a little bit longer extended bodied, a really pretty profiling goat, a goat you can appreciate for the footwork on bone under her. You may want to go ahead and get critical of her and say that she doesn't have maybe near the muscle and expression, as certainly is our first place goat, but a goat that I think goes ahead and patterns our first place goat the best of all of them. We go into a third place goat. Goat I really liked and appreciated when you handle. A goat for me when you go ahead and get her on the moves, not nearly as athletic and flexible as what the first two goats are. A goat that goes ahead and gets a little tick weaker in the rear passions than what the first two place goats of the class does as well. Our fourth place goat of the class, a really extended goat, a goat that maybe doesn't cover the overall muscle shape and dimension of other goats in the class. But a nice goat that fits in the fourth place. As we round out the class, some goats that we just maybe like to go ahead and change structurally in order to make them more competitive in this class. They certainly have some breeding characteristics that we may appreciate in breeding pieces that you can certainly use in a breeding herd. But let's congratulate these exhibitors.
Entering the ring now is our breeding junior doe, class 3. Our exhibitors are Abby Wilson, Colton Harkin, Emma Braun, Kaylee Harkin, and Sienna Capper. The results of our class 2, first place was Sydney Lovren, second place was Mackenzie Boach.
Really nice, excellent pair of does to start this class off, and is just kind of nitpicking, and certainly you could argue probably switching this top pair in this class. I think a pair of does that go ahead and pattern each other exceptionally well. Young lady's first place doe of the class is really on a good set of feet and legs on her. A doe you really appreciate for the length of body and how she's extended through that front 1/3. A doe you may want to go ahead and get a critical of her in terms of maybe how she sets that rear passion, in terms of you could say maybe she's a little bit narrower base than our second place doe of the class, but I really think that's being very critical of a high powered doe in this first in this class and sitting in first place. Young men's doe here in second place, really a pretty profiling doe. I think the difference for me when you really had go ahead and look at these two does in terms of how they're set together, I think for me flexibility is important, as I mentioned, but this doe for myself, maybe it isn't quite as thick as what the first place doe of the class is. She's got a lot of hair on her and is fitted to a T as well. Both of them are very well presented today, but fits in the second place hole. As we go ahead into the third place doe, a longer body doe of the class, a doe that you can really appreciate for the feet and legs under her in terms of that foot size. A doe for me that just doesn't have near the amount of muscle and mass that the first two does of the class does today. Our fourth place doe of the class, a doe that you can appreciate for how open she is, a doe that's certainly a little bit rounder in her shape and lines than what the does ahead of her, but certainly a doe that could be a breeding piece for this young lady. As we round out the class, a doe you can really appreciate, maybe just doesn't have the overall foot size and lines in terms of how we'd like to structurally make them today, but let's congratulate this set of exhibitors for the does they brought out.
Our next class is our breeding yearling doe, and it's Mackenzie Boak. The results of our class 3 breeding junior doe, first place was Kaylee Harkin, second place was Colton Harkin. After this class, all breeding doe classes that receive first or second place may enter the ring for the reserve and champion.
Young lady brought a nice single yearling doe entry here, and as I told the young lady, it's probably the only class anybody will agree with me on all day. I can't get this one wrong. So let's go ahead and put our hands together for this exhibitor and the yearling doe they brought out. Congratulations.
We will now be picking a champion and reserve champion for a breeding doe. If you received first or second place in your class, you may now enter the ring.
as I said earlier, we had a lot of good quality within these classes, and especially in this doe division. I think there's a lot of depth of quality within some of these classes of some of these does that certainly can go on and be much more competitive beyond just the county fair. I think these kids have done a great job in getting these animals presented and showed today, and I look forward to working with them through showmanship as well. But the most important thing is, I think, as we look at these breeding does, as I've mentioned kind of throughout the day, I think it's important to have does with some feet and legs under them that are obviously making these does to be functional, but also some does that are obviously going to be able to lay down and have some offspring. I think there's a pair of them today that I'd like to keep together for this champion drive, and I'll go ahead and select those champions and select those or congratulate those kids. But before I do that, let's go ahead and put our hands together for all of the exhibitors that brought these does out today.
Our champion breeding junior doe was Kaylee Harkin. Our reserve is Colton Harkin. Their banners are sponsored by Mittag Family Show Goats. We will now start senior showmanship. We will go seniors, then intermediates, and followed by juniors. All goat exhibitors, please keep your goats pinned in the arena pins until after the junior showmanship show. So all senior showmanship participants may now enter the ring.
Certainly appreciate these senior showmen coming out today and being able to exhibit their projects. I think both these young ladies have done a nice job doing it, and unfortunately we have to make a decision here. And I think it kind of comes down to the fact of talking with them a little bit in terms of what they were able to share with me about their project, but also what the market value and what weights we should maybe going ahead and killing, putting these goats to harvest, I should say, in terms of meat product as well. I'll go ahead and select your champion showman out here, and then I'll follow up with the reserve. But help me put your hands together to congratulate both these exhibitors for their projects today.
Our champion senior goat for showmanship is Cassidy Stout. This is Cassidy's last year as a exhibitor at our fair because she just graduated from high school. Our reserve is Madison Klinkenberg. She also is a senior, and this is her last year. Dike Implement sponsored both of their trophies. We are now ready for the intermediate goat showmanship.
Let's put our hands together for these 5 kids. They've done a nice job out here. The important thing is, obviously, showmanship is one of those things that kind of goes throughout the day, but it's an opportunity to kind of really evaluate them now within their own age group and division. And I think all 5 of these kids have really done a nice job. As I kind of mentioned earlier, some important things in terms of what the average daily gain of a goat is, or how many pounds of feed I'm feeding it. I know at home, just like my kids, it's a scoop or it's a can or whatever that amount is, but I think it's also important that kids have an understanding beyond that in terms of how many pounds is that, or when we look at nutrition of animals, of what percentage of protein of feed that may be. I think those are obviously educational things. Sometimes we just get in the habit of doing it, but also having kids understanding that is exceptionally important. I think there's a couple of kids that go ahead and sort themselves within this class for me, and they've done an exceptional job throughout the day showing these animals. But I'll go ahead and select your champion and follow up with your reserve. Let's go ahead and put their hands together one last time.
Your champion intermediate showman is Colton Harkin. His trophy is sponsored by the Shell Rock Rockets 4-H Club. Our reserve champion showman is Emma Wedeking. Her trophy is sponsored by Cordis Excavating. And would our junior showman please enter the ring? Our junior showmanship class is going to start next.
great group of kids out here, with a lot of them being the first-time exhibitors, and some of them been back a second and third time. But for the most part, a lot of them said they were first-time exhibitors, and all of them had a hard time setting their feet up, they said, in terms of getting to this point. So it was good to talk with them in terms of how they got their projects ready for the fair, but also in terms of the things they're going to do next year, and as they come back and continuously explore these projects. I think the fundamentals the kids work at and try to get them set up to their best of the ability. And I know it's kind of hard with these projects sometimes, but also the continuation of working with them prior to this point of getting them to the fair to try to go ahead and get them there successfully. I think there's a couple of kids that have done that for me today and continuously do a good job with them. Congratulations to all of you. You're all winners in my book, so to speak, and look forward to hopefully having you back here and showing some projects again next year. But let's put our hands together for all 6 of these kids, because they certainly have done a nice job.
She's going to go right at the end, and I'm going to announce these winners and tell people to stay tuned. Okay? Your champion junior showman is Brennan Steer. His trophy is sponsored by Joe's Heating, Cooling, and Plumbing. Your reserve champion junior showman is Kaylee Harkin. Her trophy is sponsored by Wicks Waterworks. This concludes our GOAT show. However, stay tuned for a few words from our 2020 Fair Queen.